Good morning, students. I hope everybody's doing well. Today, we are going to have our class by video. So this way you can look at it anytime you want or as much as you want. I think everyone has this worksheet. We're going to be going over the verbs. They give you the third person masculine verb, the he went, she went, whatever verbs, but they don't really give you the other verbs. So I'm going to show you how you can find the verb and how you can go over it. And then you'll also have it on this worksheet. In Hebrew, the majority of the verbs are past tense. And that's a good thing because past tense are probably the easiest of the verbs to conjugate. So the first one we're going to look at is I. So the word for I is ani, and it ends in an E. So when you look here, you can see that the last sound of I, ani, is going to be attached to the root of the verb. So I reigned, the root of reigned is malak. So all you do is attach T to malak, malakti. I stood. Amad is the root for stood, so you say amadti. I went. Halak, halakti. I guarded. Shamar, shamarti. Remembered. Zachar, zacharti. I heard. Shama, shamati. So it's really easy when you see tav with here a yud, it's usually something that has to do with I. It even works for some of the nouns too. So all you do is attach T at the end of the root. So let's look at you masculine singular, ata. So ata, the ending sound is ah. So it's the same thing. You take the root of the word and you add ta. So you reigned is malak, so it's malakta. Stood, amad, amadta. Went, halak, halakta. Then guarded, shamar, shamarta. Remembered, zachar, zacharta. Heard, zama, zamata. Shama, shamata. So very simple. It basically goes by the pronoun, and the ending sounds the same for I and you masculine. And then the same thing for you feminine. You feminine is at. So you just put a t at the end. It's not a ta because that would be ata. It's just at. So malakt, amat, halakt, shamart, zahart, shamat. Of all the ones, this is probably the hardest one to say because you want to have it's got basically two consonants at the end of the word. So it's a little bit harder to pronounce. Now, he is always the root. So that's the good part of the past tense, because the past tense, he, third person singular, is always the root of the verb. So if you know the root, then you know the third person masculine, he. He reigned, he stood, he went, he guarded, he remembered, he heard, are all the roots. So let's go to she. Now she is the one that is the most different. Of course, we're women, we're different. So it takes a different set. You take the first two letters of the root as one syllable, and then you attach hey at the end. So for reigned, the root is malak, but you say malcha. For stood, it's amad, but you say da. So the first two letters are a syllable, and then you just attach at the end. She went, halak is halcha. Guarded, shamar, shamra. Remembered, zachar, zachra. Heard, shema, shama. So shema, it sounds sort of the same. The only thing is it has a hey at the end. So when you're reading it, you'll know that it's feminine. But if you were speaking, you would have a hard time. You'd have to take it in context. So now let's go on to anachnu. So here again, at the end of anachnu is new. And basically that's what you're going to add to the root of all the words. So rain, malach, malachnu. Stood, amadnu. Went, halachnu. Guarded, shamarnu. Remembered, zacharnu. Heard, shamanu. So that's an easy one. And the ones that we've done so far are probably the ones that are most used. Now, they, and I didn't really put in the you masculine and singular plural yet, but I think on the next paper I did include that because they're not really using that much yet. So I wanted us to get used to these verbs before we decided to go on and do all of the conjugations. Now they, you have a masculine and feminine, they, but as far as the past tense, they put them together. So it doesn't really matter if it's masculine or feminine. It's just one ending. So even though the word for they is hem, the ending is hu. So this is the only one that's a little strange, but you'll get used to this one. So they reigned. This also has the first two letters as the syllable. So instead of malach, it's malhu. Stood is amad, but it's amdu. They went, halhu. They guarded, shamru. They remembered, zachru. And they heard, shamru. Did I say they guarded right? Shamru. Oops, I got these wrong. They heard. Shamu. It's shamu. Oh, I'm sorry. I did that one wrong. I will have to correct it. I'm glad I'm going through this. Sorry. So that one should be shamu. Let me change that. Okay, let me change this here. Go to Hebrew. And that's an ein. There we go. Sorry, you may have to change that on your paper too. Okay, next we're going to look at our Beged Kefet letters. I think we've kind of talked about them, but we have them here on this paper all together. So the Beged Kefet letters are special letters that get special treatment. Originally, all the Beged Kefet letters had a different sound when they had the dogish in them. But through time, it's changed and they don't really all change the sound. The most familiar that we know are the vet and the bet. That's a beged, that's the B, okay, for beged. So it's a vet when there's no dogish and there's a bet when it's a dogish, but technically this is just one letter. Gimel is one that has come to just be one sound. I have no clue what the other sound would have been. Probably more of a guttural G, more of a soft G. Then Dalet, here again, it's just a D now. Beged Kefet, okay, Kaf. It's either Kaf or K, Kaf. When it has the dogish, it's a softer sound, and when it has the dogish, it's the hard K. And then Fe and Pei. That's very distinctive. So we have that. That's the F in fet. And the last letter T, tav. We've discussed this many times, how it used to be the without the dogish, it was more of a th, like a, and it does, if it ends a word, it usually does not have a dogish, and it is more of a softer T. You don't hear it as well. But most of the dogish sounds are at the beginning or in the middle with in fact, with all of them. It's at the beginning of a word, a big Kefet letter usually takes a dogish. Only 3 of the letters actually change the pronunciation of the letter. So bet, vet, cough, 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 fe, pe. Those are the ones that we know. And it's beged Kefet because beg, ged, be, b, g, d, Kefet, k, f, t. Beged Kefet. Okay, so a beged Kefet letter is almost always at the beginning of the word. So here's some examples of that. At the end of the word, the beged Kefet usually does not take the dogish. So the more softer sound is usually at the end of the word. When a beged Kefet is in the middle of the word, a dogish will change the pronunciation of the word or its transliteration. And I think we have talked about this, but we'll talk about it a little more. Shabbat. So if we just did our normal transliteration, it would just be Shabbat. But with the dogish in the middle, basically it's Shab, shab, and then bat. So basically the B is attached to both syllables. So that's why we get the spelling for Shabbat with 2 B's. Now, sometimes it's pronounced in the middle of the word, especially if it has a shva underneath it and it's a dogish. So this would be amad de t. So it's got the dogish, so it's going to be pronounced twice, amad, because of the ending shva, and then it's pronounced de because it has the dogish t, amadati. Heat palal is the same thing. Heat, okay. Pal, so that's really P-A-L, lal. So it's got the 2 letters, the 2 L's. When the tav is at the end of the word, you sometimes see it transliterated as a TH because there's usually no dogish. Well, I found out there's not a dogish at the end of the word. So this is where we go from, you have Beit Torah, at the end of the word Beit, there's no dogish. So it's actually pronounced Beit Torah, but it's transliterated as Beth Torah. So that's where we get our Beth. I always wondered that after I took Hebrew, like, why is it B-E-T-H and not just B-E-T, Bet Torah? But it's Beth Torah because there's no dogish at the end. The same thing with Ruth. Ruth is really her name, but there's no dogish, so we transliterate it as Ruth with a T-H. There are other names in the Bible that we do the same thing with. So the last thing we cover on this worksheet, and we'll have a worksheet, I've been making them for about every 2 classes right now, 2 lessons, not necessarily classes, but 2 lessons. I think after the 10th lesson, I may do them every time, or we may stop doing them. It'll just depend. I do a lot of these so you won't have to keep looking back, and you'll have a sheet that you can have beside you when you're doing your new lesson. I know when I was going through this, I was constantly looking back because I hadn't yet learned like the conjugations or anything. So I thought this might help you out. So anyway, the shva at the beginning of a word is always pronounced with a short slurred sound. So kli. Now, the thing is, when I asked some of the Israelis about these, they said, well, Yes, some of them you will hear the kali, but just say it fast. So, okay. So it sounds more like kli, but it's kali, but it's when it's pronounced quickly, it's kli. So katav, same thing, katav. This one, it's more easy to hear the k because the k and the t is not a sound that you can put together. We have a sound for kli, so kli. Anyway, mahal and shalach. So at the beginning of the words, it's always pronounced. Sometimes it's pronounced quickly and you don't really hear it as much. The shva at the end of the word is always a silent vowel. It is not pronounced at all. You see it under the final form of the kaf sofit. And a lot of times, even in my beginner book, I've noticed that they put like the shva at the end of everything. So I don't know why it's there because you know it's the end of the word because there aren't any other letters. But anyway, that's what it is. So we have lach, at, elek, derek. So they just, especially the kaf sofits, they almost always have either shva or kamatz or something by them. A lot of times you won't see it under the tav or the other letters, but all right, the shva in the middle of the word usually falls at the end of a syllable. That's the first thing you look for, and it's not pronounced. So yishte, nafalnu, evne, samtem. So it's sort of like a syllable marker. When two shvas appear side by side in the middle of a word, the first shva is a silent syllable marker, and the second one is pronounced with a short slurred sound. Oh, sounds, okay. Let's see. Yik tevu. So yik, that's one syllable. Te, vu. So it's its own little syllable. Kad shika, kad shika. Here is the kaf sofit with the kamatz. Rag lechem, rag lechem. So when you've got two shvas together, the first one usually is silent, and the second one is pronounced with a I sound. Okay, that's that worksheet. Hope this helps you, and we'll have more, and we'll start our next lesson next week.